Mr. Chris Hartman. I thought about the name, but I didn't flinch or miss a beat in my conversation with Nathan, the bartender. I had only been back in Texas for 6 months after a 3-year self-imposed exile. How did she find me? And more importantly, why? I didn't turn around or acknowledge him in any way. I was just about to deliver the punchline to a particularly dirty joke when I felt a hand on my shoulder. Mr. Hartman, my name is Nick Carter. I've been hired to find you. I raised an eyebrow at Nathan and turned my head ever so slightly. Did you want to keep that hand, Nick? I felt his hand leave my shoulder. I turned back to Nathan and delivered the punchline. He laughed heartily, popped another Shiner Bock for me, and told me it was on the house as he ambled down to the other end of the bar, still chuckling. Mr. Hartman, we have business to discuss. I interrupted him. My name isn't Hartman, and I have no business with you, unless you want to hire me to weld something. If not, we have nothing to discuss. Mr. Hart, that was all he got out before he hit the floor. I put $20 on the bar, massaged my right hand, waved to Nathan, and rose to leave. Mr. Hartman, you're a hard man to find, and I have no intention of starting my search over again. I looked down at the taser gun he was aiming at me. Even though he was sprawled on the floor, it was pretty intimidating. As he stood, he wiped a trickle of blood from the corner of his mouth. I have no qualms about using it, so sit down and let's have a chat. I glanced at Nathan, who was heading our way, and waved him off. He paused, nodded, and then said, "Let me know if you need anything, Jack." "Thanks, Nathan." I turned back and looked at the taser. Who the hell packs a taser in Texas? I chuckled and leaned in a little closer to him. "Do I know you, boy?" "Screw you, Mr. Hartman. Your manners need some work, son. You can't have been raised in Texas. Why don't you call me Jack, and then tell me who you are and what the hell you want?" "Jack, is it? Okay, Jack." Nathan set us up with a couple of beers and put it on Nick's tab. I smiled, sat in the nearest booth, and asked, "So why don't you tell me who this Hartman guy is and why you have such a big stick up your butt about him?" "Okay, Jack. We'll play it your way. For the moment, anyway." Mr. Evan Hartman was a successful, wealthy Dallas businessman who disappeared without a trace just over 3 years ago. He is married to a Mrs. Leah Hartman, and they have a daughter, Clara, who's 23. My name, as I told you, is Nick Carter. I have been hired to find Evan Hartman and return him to Dallas. Really? 3 years, you say? And without a trace? What's that got to do with me? You seem to have mistaken me for him. But I am neither Evan Hartman nor a successful businessman. My name is Jack Brown. I weld for cash, play a little guitar badly, and travel some. I had been so careful before I left. I paid a lot of money for a completely new identity. Since then, I had grown my hair and beard and lost about 30 pounds of fat, replacing it with 20 pounds of muscle. Leah wouldn't recognize me if I spat on her. When I left Dallas, I drove north and west for 3 days, stopped, and found a trailer for lease. I enrolled in a welding class at a local community college and started my life over. I left everything but cash in Dallas. A high-paying job, 2 homes, cars, credit cards, keys, a cell phone, clothes, and a lying, cheating wife. I paid cash for a used Ford F-150, registered it in my new name, and drove it to a music store where I bought a used but beautiful Martin Dreadnought. I didn't take anything with me but the clothes on my back. I rarely stayed in one place for more than 6 or 8 months and always paid cash. I didn't have any credit cards or a cell phone. I worked for cash under the table, didn't file a tax return, and almost always stayed out of trouble. It had to be Clara. I couldn't cut her out completely. About 15 or 16 months after I bolted, I sent her an email to let her know I was alive. I sent her another before every move from a public library computer, just to let her know that I loved her and was thinking of her. I never told her where I was or why I left, and I didn't respond to any of her questions about either subject. She could squeeze that out of her mother. "Well, Jack," sneered Nick, "as I was saying, a little over 3 years ago, Mr. Hartman just up and disappeared, and no one seemed to know anything about it. For the first year or so, the police followed up rather casually, in my opinion, and many suspected he either ran off with another woman or that he was the subject of some foul play on the part of Mrs. Hartman. It was a difficult year for Mrs. Hartman, personally, professionally, and financially. She had tried to liquidate some of their assets, but didn't have a power of attorney and couldn't get Mr. Hartman declared dead. So she was stuck. There was money in the bank, but few new funds coming in. So she went through those rather quickly. The poor dear. I tittered. She sounds like she's in a pickle. So tell me, Nick, how do I fit into this little made-for-TV movie? I excused myself, marched up the stairs without looking back, and locked myself in the bedroom. Mark's voice climbed up the stairs about half an hour later, cracking through the door. You coming back down? We need to clear the table. I didn't respond. I couldn't. If I opened my mouth, a scream or a sob would have come out, and I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of hearing me break. I scrolled through my banking app, a frown deepening the lines on my face. Our account was looking dire again this month, and the grocery list wasn't getting any shorter. Lily needed new shoes, too. She was sprouting like a weed. Mark's voice tumbled in from the living room. Grace, why is there a charge for $48.95 from Martin's art supplies? Just picked up a few things, I said, tapping through the app to transfer what remained of my personal savings to cover it. I needed them. Needed. Come on, Grace. That's money we could have put towards something important, isn't it? His voice was flat, bored even, with a hint of something else. Was it disappointment? Frustration? I sighed. Art is important to me, Mark. The same way your golf is important to you. I didn't mention the fact that his golf clubs cost more than a year's worth of my supplies. Yeah, but golf is networking. It's part of my job. What does your painting get us? A cluttered house and wasted cash, he grumbled. It gets me through the day, I murmured, feeling that old familiar tug-of-war in my chest. Mark snorted. Through the day? We have to be smart about money, not just spend it on whatever gets us through the day. Budget, Grace. Budget. That word felt like a choke chain. I pay for my art supplies with my own money, Mark. The money I had before, I trailed off, not wanting another fight. My before was a long-gone chapter, one that contained a job, independence, and a once-sharp dream of my own gallery. Your money is our money, isn't it? He shot back, the insinuation that my financial independence was history clear in his tone. And your money is running out fast. What then? Later, at the store, I chose the cheaper brands, counting every cent, every compromise. I bought the smallest tubes of paint, the ones I could slip into the cart without raising eyebrows. Back home, I unpacked the bags with robotic precision, every item a testament to our tightrope walk above financial ruin. Putting back some luxuries, are we? Mark commented, his gaze landing on the no-name cereal and store-brand pasta. Yes. Tightening the belt, I answered without looking at him, hiding the receipts, a paper trail of my crimes. He hummed, rummaging through the bags like an investigator looking for a slip-up. Where are the Greek yogurts you like? And isn't this the cheap coffee? I shrugged, busying myself with placing a can of tomatoes in the pantry. Prices went up. Had to make some cuts. Don't see any cuts in your art budget, though, he said, a cold finger pointing out the new brushes I'd slipped under a loaf of bread. I turned to him, meeting his eyes for the first time since the conversation began. This keeps me sane, Mark. My art keeps me sane. My voice was firm, and I clenched my fist around the countertop to stop the shake in my hand. Well, sanity's quite the luxury item these days, eh? He nodded toward the brushes, his words deliberate biting. That night, I painted, not out of passion but frustration. Each stroke was a challenge, a cut from our personal budget to fit within the constraints of Mark's expectations. But as I worked, I remembered a time when these brushes were a joy to hold, not a weapon I had to defend. Mark was somewhere across the country, tangled up in business trip meetings. We decided to drop the latest task on me. His voice buzzed through my phone, sounding like he was already out the door before he even finished a sentence. Grace, you gotta pull together a birthday present for my boss's wife, Clara. Her big day's in a week. Okay. Do you have any cash set aside for that? I asked, squinting at our already tight budget on my laptop screen. Nah, you figure it out. Just make it look like we put some thought into it, he muttered, sounding distracted. Hang on. You want something nice, but I'm supposed to magic up the funds for it. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks. You always find a way. Make it happen, Grace. And with that cheery little line, he was gone. I let out a long, slow breath, closing my eyes and trying to push back the frustration gnawing at my last nerve. I didn't have the cash, but I needed something that would knock Clara's socks off. No pressure, right? After a deep dive into Clara's online world, it was clear she had a thing for art. Her feed was full of gallery visits, pictures of canvases that probably cost more than our car. She even had photos with artists, talked about supporting the arts, patronage, and all that jazz. An idea sparked, and I grabbed it before it could blaze out of my mind. A painting. From me. I had the paints. I had the canvas. I sure as hell had the motive. I'd give Clara something no one else could, not off some high street. A painting, then. Decision made. I was going to need every minute of every day if it was going to look anything like the kind of stuff Clara posted. I pulled out my old easel, set it up in the living room, and got to work. All the while, fingers crossed that my little slice of creativity would cut it in the high-stakes world of business birthday gifts. But now, those rules seem like a distant memory. When I tried to discuss her schedule, lack of affection, and our dead sex life, she stonewalled me for days. When I pointed out her violation of our agreed-upon communication framework, she lashed out, dismissing the rules and telling me to shove them up my bum. Through clenched teeth, I reminded her that these were non-negotiable commitments. Her response was cutting. Screw off and go negotiate with your right hand from now on. Message received. Her apathy was louder than any words. Was she cheating on me? Perhaps. Texas is a no-fault state, so it wouldn't matter legally, but I had to know. Betrayal wasn't just about infidelity. It was about being lied to. She knew my stance. Attraction to someone else was natural, but acting on it without honesty wasn't. If she wanted someone else, divorce was a first step, not deception. My focus shifted from preserving the relationship to protecting myself. Years ago, before we merged our finances, I had set up a separate investment account where I funneled bonuses and savings. I never told her about it, largely because she insisted on managing our finances, and I had wanted a safety net. Over time, that account had grown significantly. Filing our taxes separately had been her idea, and now it provided me with plausible deniability about its existence. If she wasn't cheating, I'd split everything fairly in a divorce. But if she was, she'd see none of it. The Dallas house and our country property were another concern. I wanted to keep the latter, a retreat I had poured my soul into over the years. If necessary, I'd let her have the Dallas home, even though it felt like conceding too much. But if I couldn't keep the country property, I'd ensure it was sold before it went to her. Time was of the essence. If she served me first, I'd lose any leverage. My first call was to a college friend, a corporate lawyer. Over dinner, I explained my predicament and sought advice. His assessment was grim. Legally, there was no way to shield my assets in a divorce. Texas's no-fault laws meant an even split was the best I could hope for, regardless of her infidelity. His personal advice, however, was less orthodox. Don't file for divorce. Find out if she's cheating. If she is, take what you can and let her come after you. He referred me to a family law attorney, a shark he claimed even he would fear in court. The next day, I met her. She walked me through measures to protect myself, changing beneficiaries on my will and insurance policies, and hiring a private investigator. According to her, evidence of infidelity might not affect the division of assets, but it could be a useful bargaining chip. She connected me with a PI, an ex-cop with a solid reputation. Within days, my life was wired for surveillance. The PI quickly uncovered her paramour and their rendezvous. Soon, I had video evidence in hand. Watching it was gut-wrenching. The physical act of cheating wasn't the worst part. It was the cruel words. They mocked me openly, planned their tryst in our bed, and reveled in their deception. Her lover's suggestion to cut me off sexually had been enthusiastically adopted. Now, their twisted pleasure revolved around humiliating me further. The woman I saw on those tapes was unrecognizable. Had I ever truly known her? The weight of betrayal crushed me. Seeing her infidelity stripped me of the anger and resolve I thought I'd feel. Instead, I was hollow. I sealed the evidence and handed it to my lawyer with instructions to pass it to our daughter if anything happened to me. I prepaid Clara's college tuition from our joint savings, depleting the account significantly. Then, I liquidated my hidden investment account. It would sustain me for years, ensuring I'd never need to touch the remaining marital assets. 2 weeks later, I stood in our Dallas house one last time. I left my keys, phone, and wallet on the foyer desk. My wedding ring I placed on my pillow, let her interpret that however she wished. I packed nothing but essentials and walked away without a word. I didn't look back. Let her wonder. Let her deal with the fallout. My only solace was the knowledge that, at least in this, I had taken control. For the first time in years, I felt free, untethered by lies, free to start anew. I didn't leave any letters. I walked out the front door without bothering to close it, got in my new pickup truck around the corner, and drove away. 2 weeks later, a 40-something married man and father of 3 was mugged and savagely beaten as he exited a Motel 6. Cheap prick. He would walk again, though not for a while, and even then with a pronounced limp. A month after the mugging, his wife received a FedEx package containing video evidence of her husband in bed with a woman who appeared to be in her early 50s. I heard they divorced a year later, leaving him broke. After leaving, I drove aimlessly for 3 days. I didn't have a plan. I stopped for lunch in a small town one day and decided to stay a while. A local community college offered welding classes, so I enrolled. Why not? After a year, I found work welding for an auto body shop. It wasn't a real welding gig, but plenty of people were willing to pay cash for a guy like me. Cheaper than a certified welder and perfect for small jobs. I enjoyed the work for about 4 months before moving on. Over the next 2 years, I crisscrossed the country, stopping in small towns to get laid and weld something. For the first time in years, I was happy. I hated my job in Dallas. The money was great, and I excelled at it. But every morning was a battle to get out of bed and face another day. I did it for my family. Lila loved the money, and Clara deserved it. Lila got to play the saint, working for a not-for-profit earning peanuts while helping people. Or so it seemed. In reality, her organization was a playground for rich businessmen, wives looking to feel self-important. Fundraising events made the society pages, but the dresses they wore cost more than most people earned in a year. It was pathetic. Most of the money raised went to fund the next charity event. Meanwhile, I worked a soul-crushing job because I loved my family. But when I left, I vowed to only do things for myself. I've slept with more than a few women since then. I wasn't looking for a soulmate or a friend, just some fun. If things got too clingy or complicated, I moved on. I don't know what became of Lila, the house, or the country acres, and I don't care. She made her choices. If she's happy with them, I can live with that. Secretly, I hope she's miserable and broke, but I won't go out of my way to ensure it. I'd like to see my daughter again someday, but only if she promises not to tell Lila. So far, she hasn't been able to make that promise. I hope she does someday.